Welcome to another Barn Explorer. 1936, our Midwest was experiencing a horrible dust storm. Farms were being wiped out. Grandpa Olson sent his oldest son out here to the Northwest to find a new start. And this is what he found. You look in there, you can see a barn that looked much like this one. That's the barn they started in, probably built in the late 1800s. And there's the imprint of the original milk house. Stanchions, flat barn. This was a can milk house. Now, the Olson's farm is very unique. It has 5 barns into one because Grandpa Olson, he remodeled. Mr. Olson's dad remodeled, and then Mr. Olson remodeled. And I hope to show and highlight all the remodels. See, there's a stairway that went up into the loft, probably built by Mr. Olson. This barn is literally a time capsule. You look here, that's where an old silo stood. He had 6 silos on this place at one time. Now we're standing in the old barn, part just outside of the old barn. This would have been a silo shed, would have been between the barn and the silo. And you walk through here, you see the curve in the wood. The roof line was built to match the silo. This is where the one silo used to stand. And you're looking up at the original old barn. He would remodel, and every time they remodeled, there was a piece of the original still there. So right here, you're in the 40s. Now you're in the 1800s. This is where the old stanchions were in the old barn. See, this is a grain box. You could shovel grain down that into this little box, and that they would dole out to the cows. Cows would have been facing right here. They would have been on the other side facing us. See, there's the old stanchions. Homemade wooden stanchions. This part of the barn is over 100 years old. That's looking into the loft, but there's not much left of the loft. You see the whitewash everywhere. See, that would have been the door into the original milk house. This is all the old barn. It's like a giant patchwork quilt. And every little piece marks a specific time in our history. Oh, yeah, booby traps everywhere. And the kid, he finds the easy way. Now here we're standing in a part of the barn that was built in the late 90s, looking up through part of the barn that was built in the early 50s into the part of the barn that was built in the 1800s. Here's an oubliette, or it's a sump for the liquid manure, if you want to call it a castle, right? This barn goes on forever and ever. This place is huge. Now let's go into the milk house. Now this milk house is something I would have been familiar with. It had been the top end, fancy for my time. And this is a strainer. It had a boot or a sock that went over that, and you push it up inside that piece of pipe, and it strained the milk as it came out of the parlor before it went into the tank. And again, these tanks were bottom loaders. They shot the milk in through the bottom as to not splatter on the top. It's a big milk house. This would have been the pump room. This is where the vacuum pump and all that stuff would have been to run the parlor. Now this parlor was built in the late 50s, early 60s. I've never seen one like this. It was a herringbone, but it's called a tricom. They milked 18 cows in here at a time. A 3-sided parlor. When they built the new parlor, the third one, they used this side right here for their medicine cows. Cows that had been treated, cows that had freshened. That's the milk that they can't put in the big tanks. If it wasn't tainted, they could use the milk for the calves. This is a parlor that I would have been at home in. This is pretty much the same equipment I would have used, just a different configuration. The wash tub and a few other things in here were added to accommodate its new purpose. I doubt any of that would have been in there when they were milking cows. See, they chipped out a chunk of the wall here. So that's looking back at the parlor that Mr. Olson's dad built. Now, this is the monster Mr. Olson built. It's a 20 cow carousel. Keep in mind, this carousel, this parlor is already over 20 years old. Retainer jugs, vacuum, all that, all sits under it. It all moves with the cows. He went out of business just 2 years ago. He wanted to retire. He has 2 daughters, and one of them wants to take over the farm, but I doubt she's going to milk cows here. Imagine it's going to be remodeled yet again. This is all that's left of the almost 900 cows that Mr. Olson milked here. These little boxes talk to the computer. They identify the cow, how much milk she gives, how much feed she gets. They're around her ankles on one side. I'm glad I got in here and recorded this, because I'm going to come back after Mr. Olson's daughter remodels the barn for whatever she's purposing it for, and compare the videos. I think that'll be very interesting. Milker station. So the cows would line up there and step onto the carousel right here. Now this is the new pump room. That's the vacuum pump. A lot bigger than what we've seen in the past. And that's the hydraulic pump in there that ran the carousel. And here's the air compressor that ran crowd gate and various gates, things that they needed air pressure for. See feeders and stalls everywhere, as far as you can see. Every time he threw on another couple dozen cows, he built a few more stalls and feeders. So here we're looking at the barn that his dad remodeled compared to the barn that he remodeled. Looking up towards the original barn. It really is amazing in here. And the stalls just go on and on forever. That green line there, that is the controls for the crowd gate. You see it there. Right here's the end of it. That's the crowd gate there. And that's a oubliette with a sump for the manure pit. However you want to look at it. It's a farm, right? The barns just go on and on forever. Now we're walking through what used to be the holding pen. This rail is what the crowd gate ran on, one on each side. Now these are automatic flushes. Water would shoot out of that. Instead of getting in here with a tractor and scraping every so many hours, you could wash it down with water pressure. There's a scraper slit right there. This part of the barn Mr. Olson added in the early 90s. And right there you can get a good view at the tail end of the original barn. You look at it with your imagination, you can see that. I think that's what the barn used to look like in there. This place is amazing. Now right here, this was popular in the late 50s or early 50s, late 40s. They're precast panels, and they locked together like Legos and then held in place by mortar. They were popular for loafing sheds. The other wall was right there at that curb. So this was a big loafing shed, and it was all precast. And here you see they put a liner in the bottom of the feeders. Preserve the feeder. See, here's more stalls, more feeders. This place was huge. This is where they kept sawdust so they can put fresh bedding in all the stalls. See, here's the outside wall of that 50s loafing shed, precast shed. See, it was a big loafing shed. Now this part of the barn was built in 1962. And this one was built by Mr. Olstein's grandpa and dad. They were in the process of building this part at a very specific time. They mixed their own grain and feed here. So that's where they mixed all the feed. This here is a great big tank of cow poop. Everything in the barn, all the waste got pumped into that tank so that it could be put on the field later. Here's another silo. Now this barn was built right on top of a manure tank, a pit. And that pit was set up so it would pump into that big blue tank above ground. So here you can see a scraper slit, and you can see the agitator hole. I wanted to get down there to show you how deep it is, but I couldn't because the sun was glaring in there too bright. But this barn was built on top of that. This part of the barn was built, like I said, 1962. This is what was going on around the county in 1962, Columbus Day. That's when they were building this barn. Columbus Day storm. Mr. Olson said he got in trouble out here playing in the barn in the storm while his dad and grandpa were trying to get the roof locked down. You're looking right down the side of the original old barn. That old barn started this whole place. More stalls, more scraper alleys. It really is a really cool place, and technologies come together but head and head. This is the holding pen. That's the crowd gate. And the rails to it sit right next to the original old barn. See? Now that crowd gate, it flips up and it rolls all the way back to the end. You lean the cows under it into this part here, and that crowd gate would flip down all the way down there, and it would push the cows all the way up this alley towards the milking parlor. So the milkers didn't have to get out and chase cows. I never worked in a dairy with a crowd gate, but I worked around them. Now, we have to take a sidestep here. Leave it to the kid. He found the only cow left, and we have to include her. We have to. This is California and her calf Celeste. California is the last cow left on a 1,600 head dairy. She loves her ears scratched. So the deal is with California is, out of all 1,600 head that Mr. Olson sold, she was the only one that didn't sell because she's blind. Blind is a bat, but she can hear and she can smell. So he's going to keep her as a pet. Now in here was an automatic calf feeder. You put the milk in that jug, and it would dispense the milk out to the calves 4, 5, 6 times a day, depending on how many times they need to be fed. This is the control room to it all, but I couldn't find the light switch, so sorry. Now this part of the barn is the parlor that Mr. Olson's dad built, and it used to have big bay windows right there, so you could look into the parlor. He was proud of his parlor and his herd, and he wanted bystanders to be able to come and see how he milked cows and what happened in the milk house. This was the Olson Dairy. Retired. We're waiting to see what his daughter does with the place. So I wish her lots of luck. And thank you to the Olson family for allowing us to traipse around their farm.